Jamshed, the next discontinuity.
Yeah, first of all, I agree with my co-panelists on the general direction that they have set. Sadajiv, in my view, in the 20th century in India and maybe the early part of the 21st century, food and food retail and food habits had been driven largely through strength of distribution and strength of advertising. And the packaged food industry has leveraged these two to increase consumption, penetration, etc., etc. I see that in the next 10 years, this paradigm is going to shift almost completely. The package, the noise, and the availability are not going to be the key drivers for consumers to take a decision. The key driver is perhaps going to be the authenticity and the personalization of the product itself, which is on offer. Today we consume a lot of packaged stuff, and even though the ingredients may be written on the package, believe me, we don't know 95% of what we are putting in our mouths. We are going with the power of the brand and the power of the taste on the palate without really understanding in its true sense what is it that the product is actually providing us and giving us. That is going to change, and it is changing far more rapidly than we think, because as Piyush rightly put it, the food processing industry in India is no longer a game of scale. It has now become a game of skill. And we have got players coming up who don't necessarily have to put in large infrastructure to create innovative products. You walk around and every food exhibition that you go to, increasingly you will find people centering their entire raison d'etre around a core unique set of products that they are creating. What would have happened in the past is that these products would not have had an outlet for consumers to reach out to. As a result of it, it became a chicken and egg thing. Today, both with the penetration of modern retail and more importantly with the penetration of online retail, this access paradigm, which earlier was driven only through the clout of distribution, is going to change. And as Piyush rightly pointed out, there is a lot of people who still need that access, which we don't consider. I think over 10 years that will change too. And once the 1 billion consumers start getting access to product, the nature of product which is now reached to them will not be driven by the ability to access, but by authentic product. So what we are doing in Star, though we are very small, so we can't influence this at any major level, is we are making sure that our systems and processes provide platforms for people to showcase such product, so that our customers can get the product that they genuinely want, desire, but more importantly have full knowledge of. It is almost as if they are in a position to have a conversation with the product, and based on that conversation decide to consume or not. And I think in 10 years the brand product landscape in the country would have undergone a sea change.
Jamshed, I just want to hold you to one point. I think you were being very humble when you said we're too small. I think we've seen the fantastic stores Star runs. I presume in that catchment, you are the world, whichever catchment you are, whether it is Lokhandwala, Koramangala, that catchment, and for the customers who come and shop, you are the world. So all these points which you mentioned, share us one or two examples where you actually impact this.
Yeah, so what we are looking at, what we are doing is that we are opening ourselves up to local players, but players with whom we can co-partner the supply chain. Because what happens in modern retail is it's got a very rigid and set supply chain, and that restricts innovation on the shelf. So we are trying to come up with our new form of a supply chain, whereby along with the partners, we manage the product life cycle end to end. And by managing the product life cycle end to end, together we are in a position to give the consumer of that catchment something different from what he or she would have got if they were in another catchment, of course, depending on their nature. Now, it's all early stages and early days, but I think we'll get it right in 10 years, that's for sure.
So, round one, I don't know what are the words you picked up from the five gentlemen here. I mean, I could hear Arvindji mention about holistic health. I think very powerful concept. Hari, in his own way, by mentioning farmers, is mentioning inclusion and not necessarily just having a transaction on retail. Piruz, I think I'm just giving words to their thoughts. I may be wrong, but almost saying nourishment can break down the boundaries, the three boundaries of three Indias. Saugata, I think added the word responsible. I think he said the next decade is about responsibility. And Jamshed, I think, echoed that, but added one more flavor of being authentic, authenticity. And I think these are some words which stay. Whenever we open the round for questions, do ask more if you want to kind of get those ideas resonated more. But here I'm going to take a slight branch out and talk about the five gentlemen here. And I think many a times when you have a lovely dish come to you served in a restaurant or in a hotel, I think you have a comment on everything. You know, you may like the masala, you may like the chutney, you may like the crockery, but very rarely, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, very rarely will ask you who made this, who's the guy who made it. And some of us do call the chef and kind of give them a pat on their back. I think what we have here are possibly those chefs, and I'm taking the liberty of using that word, those chefs, those people are cooking those lovely stuff for all of us in food retail in their own way. So when I was kind of preparing for this panel, I went around asking some of the people in my organization saying, what are the stuff which you know about these gentlemen? And I thought I'll possibly craft out one question from them because it's really about what individual leadership they get. So I'm going to start with you, Piruz. I think when I kind of did some work about knowing your thoughts better, I think I came across a very powerful word. He almost said that innovation in India, especially in food, has been reverse engineering. You take a product, you bring it here and say, okay, इसमें थोड़ा fizz डाल दो, इसमें थोड़ा flavor डाल दो, packaging tetra में कर दो, pack कर दो, and that's about it. And he almost mentioned the thought saying, we have to innovate for the country. It can't be done by something which comes from another country, another ecosystem. So my question to you, Piruz, I think it's a very powerful concept that you bring to it. I'm really going to raise the bar and say, because we began at the start of this meeting saying, how are we going to really influence a whole generation, a whole decade? So how do you think this forward engineering, how do you propose within your influence to really get forward engineering impact a generation in a decade?
Thanks. And I did mention a little about it, but I'll now elaborate it. And I did mention that we have to stop taking samples, and you use the right word. And what I said is samples from abroad and say, okay, we'll make it in India also. That we have to stop. And I do believe that there are a lot of Indian products which we can take it abroad and sell it as mass products. If today a noodle can sell around the world and a pasta can sell around the world, we can sell a lot of Indian products also around the world. Maybe a khakra or a curry, of course we are doing. And I think we'll require a new generation of Indian entrepreneurs who can start thinking of launching products not only for India, but for the world. If today, let us say the fashion houses, what they are today, they are selling products like Gucci or all for the world, why can't we have food for the world? And now having said that, the challenge is to really innovate in the labs to make that product. And we always talk of health, but generally the customer and the consumer's mind, there is too much health, the customer doesn't have the fun in it. So how do we actually create a balance between health, fun? A lot of people don't want only to eat healthy food, they also want to enjoy the food, they want to eat tasty food, and that whole balance is something which we have to really innovate, and we need to find answers and how we are going to do it, and that is something where we have to really work in our own office, what you call R&D labs. Like for example, to ask you, we have created a product which is an extruded product with chocolate inside. Now of course, chocolate has fat, but we have tried to see that it is not fried, it is baked. And we have tried to see that it is fortified. And we can claim that it is at least 50% less fat than the namkeens. And this is a product which can sell in India, which can sell anywhere in the world because everybody would like the baked chocolate snack. So something like that, how do we create products which can be not only sold in India, but the world, which are unique? And this is the format to really go. Second, I somehow believe that India is a mass country. We can be the biggest Glucon D, what I call glucose biscuit market in the world. We can become the biggest motorcycle player in the world. Similarly, India should pick up the mass food, and we should really ensure that we really become big in it. And that is possible. There are many such food categories where India can become big, but there are many challenges in that. Mostly the challenges are to do with a lot of government and the way the government has been handling the agriculture sector. They have been not doing reforms in the agriculture sector because they are thinking that the agriculture sector is like a holy cow. And I believe that like tomato paste, look at China what they have done. They have made tomato paste at such a rate that today Chinese tomato paste is making ketchup anywhere in the world, including India. Look at the Brazilian orange. They have made it in such a way that everywhere in the world, wherever you open a Tetra Pak of orange juice in the morning, you will be surprised it is Brazilian. 90% chances. So can't we do that with at least 2-3 fruits in India? And what stops us from doing it? Now you'll say, of course, we can do it. I went myself to see abroad a farm which was being owned by a company which was into it. A 500-acre farm, school inside, police station inside, fire station inside. Now that is scale. Now can any Indian company today have a 500-acre farm? Who will allow me? Can we have? Issue is no. Then how can we, without the fruit, how can I process? Because when you have a farm like that, you have a mechanized farm, you can control the quality of the fruit, we can make it less. So I have been always saying that the government needs to really liberate the agriculture economy. It has kept it in shackles. There are two things the government does always wrong. One is they believe that agriculture reform should not take place because it will be bad for the agriculturalists. They are totally wrong. Because of that, they are poor. Because of that, GDP is not growing, and they will continue to be poor. Second, they do for labor. They think will not bring labor reforms because the labor will be disadvantaged. On the contrary, labor reforms is for the labor, to get them advantage. And both is doing wrong, so we have to really use our resources to work with the government, because only when we are able to get this type of what I call like a Brazilian orange for the world, we are able to get 2-3 such crops for the world, 2-3 products for the world, the whole thing will change. This is the thing.
Always good to see Piroz getting passionate about a subject. So thank you, Piroz, for those 2 points. I just want to ask the audience, how many of you agree with Piroz that India will be able to send foods of India to the world? How many of you really agree and be genuine about it? There you go. Thanks for provoking the discussion on that.
And that is where is needed. And honestly, I do believe, and this is also needed, that we need the best brains, youngsters to come in food also. Like I'm called to many of these sessions and I ask this 12 people, how many of you would like to be in a food technologist and how many would like to go to a CFT or a NIFTIM? And I'm talking about general class, and probably answer is 2. IT, MBA, banking. Now, honestly, if we are not going to get the cream, all said and done, today people like us will need the youngsters to come in. So I really believe that food processing and agriculture sector in particular, not only food processing, I believe agriculture and food processing is quite the same kind. Let the young boys get into agriculture, which is really not happening. And we need to really, the problem is ours. We are not glorified it. I would like to really ask the organizers to glorify these sessions. Let the youngsters know in these sessions, if the media is covering, this is a great session to feed billions of the world, and this is a great industry to be in, food processing and agriculture. Let me communicate to all these youngsters of today. And there's money in it also. And don't forget, it is recession proof. There is no recession in agri and food sector. People are going to eat, it is going to be war or nothing will happen. So let youngsters come. Let youngsters, the bright youngsters come in this field, I believe, honestly.
Thank you. Those who are from IT and MBAs who want to bash up Piroz later is available in the speaker's lounge. Okay, Hari, I think I've always seen you as a man in a rush. Yeah. I think when I think Jamshed, me and some others were struggling to say how do we sell fruits and vegetables in our stores, I think this man went and said I'll do it online. And I think we know Big Basket is associated with a lot of fresh categories. I think if you go and read about him, he's a guy who will always say, get funds early because you'll need to expand much faster. So my question to you, Hari, is really, if this is going to be the decade, what will be your advice to some of the young people here in terms of saying what should be the early wins? What should be the early wins which we as young Indians should be looking at in food retailing?
I think I'll come back to saying this basic thing first is this whole issue of capital, right? And I keep saying this in multiple forums. You know, sometimes when I walk around the stalls, there's so much innovation and there's so much, stuff that's happening. Every time there's something new, number of stalls have gone up. Amitabh was telling me the reason to move out of Renaissance and be here is so that he can accommodate, more people who can be part of this, So the key thing, I think we need to be clear, and there are 2 important things that I have learned, from what you need to do when you want to start something, right? Which comes way back in 99, 2000 when we started our first venture, and all the trouble and the pain that we went through to what happened now. One is essentially make sure that, the ecosystem is right. And that is so critical. Many a times we tend to ignore the fact that is the ecosystem ready for me to actually run, a business of this kind? And when I say ecosystem, from our perspective, is really the readiness as far as the internet is concerned, smartphones are concerned, broadband is concerned, payment gateways are concerned, and so many such things that we didn't have then when we started in 99, and went through a huge struggle to actually put together a business. And in fact, we had to pivot and move back to the physical space. And basically set up a physical business. So one is basically the ecosystem. Second is capital, which is so critical. We tend to believe that, let me start, I will build it, then I will showcase something. The biggest thing that stops you from growing and stops you from going forward, and such a simple thing, right? But people don't realize that the earlier you do it, and the earlier you dilute, and the earlier you give away your stake, the better it is for you. Because you tend to hold back and saying, how can I sell my company out, when I'm 5 days old or 1 week old or 1 month old? Believe me, the biggest issue that you will face is 3 months later, you will be back, going to investors and not focusing on your business. And so get that out of the way completely. So it's critical to have capital. It's critical to have your ecosystem. And finally, I think it's all about appetite for risk, right? And that's so important. I find so many people who hold back and say, listen, can I take the risk? Can't I take the risk? If you don't have that appetite, I think you'll keep on struggling as far as innovation is concerned. And Sada, I must tell you that this was a hard decision we took, starting online. In most countries globally, online grocery is the last online player to come. And that's because it's the most complex, it's very challenging. And even when they come, they essentially start with FMCG first. And I think there was an element of risk that we took, and more often than not, if you're committed, it plays out. So doing fruits and vegetables from day one in every city that we went and took that challenge, it can either make you or break you, is important. So that's the last part, which is appetite for risk. And that all this is provided you've raised enough capital and the ecosystem is right for you to run it.